The rule was simple. It was the first thing they taught you when you moved to Oak Haven, a decaying town nestled in the claustrophobic hollows of the Appalachian foothills. Nobody mentions Willow Street. They didn't tell you why. They didn't tell you what happened there. They just stared at you, with eyes that looked like wet glass, their lips pressed into thin, bloodless lines until you nodded. You learned to navigate the town by memorizing the grid of the other streets: Maple, Pine, Oak, and Elm. Willow was the void in the center of the map. It was the gap in the conversation. When you drove by the intersection, where the rusted sign hung by a single screeching hinge, you didn't look. You kept your eyes fixed on the dashboard. You held your breath, counting the seconds until the asphalt beneath your tires turned back into solid, familiar stone. For Julian, a man whose curiosity had always been a jagged shard of glass in his side, the silence wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. Julian was a transplant, a man whose life had been stripped down to the studs. He had lost his wife Clara to a long, grinding illness that had sucked the vibrancy out of his world, leaving him with nothing but a hollow chest and a frantic need to occupy his mind. He moved to Oak Haven not for peace, but for the anonymity of its decay. He was a man who preferred the company of ghosts to the pity of the living. He kept a journal, chronicling his transition, but the pages were mostly filled with memories of Clara, her laugh, the way she smelled like bergamot and old paper, the specific weight of her head on his shoulder. For 6 months, he played the game. He tipped his hat to the storekeeper, Old Man Miller, who always seemed to be watching the horizon for weather that never came. He made small talk about the harvest, about the dampness of the soil, about how the mountains seemed to press closer to the houses every year. He never asked about the street. He filled his days with the mundane, trying to bury his grief under the heavy, damp soil of the mountains. But then he met Sarah. Sarah was the kind of person who seemed to vibrate at a different frequency. She was a librarian with dirt under her fingernails and a habit of humming minor key melodies that made the hair on your arms stand up. She, too, carried a shadow. They bonded over lost books, the smell of rain, and the shared, unspoken understanding that they were both living in the aftermath of something catastrophic. Their courtship was not a dance, but a slow immersion. They fell into a rhythm of late-night coffee and slow, intimate conversations that felt like secrets whispered in a confessional. He found himself starting to heal. He began to look forward to the mornings. He loved the way she traced the scars on his knuckles as if they were constellations. He loved that she was the only thing in Oak Haven that felt real, a tether holding him to the world of the living. He began to imagine a future, a small, quiet life built on the foundations of their shared trauma. They walked the perimeter of the town, avoiding the center, laughing at the way the fog clung to the foothills like a shroud. The escalation began on a Tuesday in November. A storm was howling outside, the wind sounding like a woman screaming in a distant field. They were sitting on Julian's porch, the floorboards groaning under the weight of the gale. The house felt thin tonight, the walls shivering. Sarah had been quiet for hours, her gaze fixed on the pitch-black void of the woods beyond the porch light. "I have to go there," she whispered. Her voice was thin, brittle, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Julian frowned, pulling his blanket tighter around her. The familiar ache of protective love flared in his chest. "Go where, love?" She turned to him, and the light from the lantern cast deep, hollow shadows in her sockets. She looked terrified, yet mesmerized, as if she were staring at a sunset she knew would blind her. "Willow Street, my sister. She's calling me." Julian felt a cold spike of dread drive into his stomach. Her sister had been missing for 10 years. The town lore said she'd run away, but everyone knew the police had stopped looking the moment they reached the intersection of Willow. It was a local tragedy that had been surgically removed from the town's history, buried under decades of forced apathy. "Sarah, no," he said, his voice firm, his heart hammering against his ribs. "We don't talk about that. We don't go there. You're all I have." "I have to," she repeated, a single tear cutting a path through the dust on her cheek. "She's not resting, Julian. She's hungry, and I can hear her chewing." She stood up abruptly, and before he could reach for her, she was gone, swallowed by the freezing dark of the storm. Julian didn't think. He didn't weigh the consequences. His only thought was of the silence that would return to his life if she vanished. He threw on his coat and sprinted into the rain, his boots tearing through the mud. He followed the sound of her rhythmic, sobbing humming. It pulled him toward the center of town, toward the forbidden zone. When he reached the intersection, the world changed. The rain stopped instantly. The air grew unnaturally still, smelling of ozone and rotting lilies, the smell of a funeral that had gone on for far too long. The streetlights here weren't broken. They were glowing with a sickly, bruised violet hue that cast long, distorted shadows across the cracked pavement. There were houses, but they looked wrong, like charcoal sketches drawn by a trembling hand. They were tilted at impossible angles, the windows jagged like broken teeth. The architecture itself seemed to be in a state of constant, fluid agitation, as if the buildings were rearranging themselves when his back was turned. Julian saw her. Sarah was standing in the middle of the road, her back to him, facing a house that seemed to be pulsing a slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction of the siding, like a giant, wooden lung. "Sarah!" he screamed, his voice raw, stripped of its composure. She turned. She looked exactly like herself, the same coat, the same messy hair, the same desperate eyes. For a moment, she looked relieved to see him. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling. "Julian, come here," she urged, her voice trembling but unmistakably her own. "I found her. She's just inside. Please, help me bring her home. She's so cold." He ran toward her, relief surging through him, masking the cold dread that should have kept him rooted to the spot. He reached out to grab her, to pull her back into the dark, toward safety. But as his fingers brushed her sleeve, the asphalt beneath his boots flexed. It wasn't hard ground. It shifted, soft and wet, like overstretched skin. He stumbled, falling to his hands and knees. The ground beneath him felt warm, pliable, and impossibly rhythmic. Underneath the pavement, something moved. A deep, heavy thud echoed from beneath the street, followed by the sound of grinding teeth, deep and muffled. A vibration traveled up his arms, a sickening sensation of something shifting in the darkness beneath the surface. Sarah's expression flickered. Her skin didn't ripple. It grew pale, translucent. He saw the dark, vein-like structures beneath the surface of her neck. He saw her eyes widen, not with love, but with a terrifying, hollow recognition of what was watching them. "Julian," she said, and her voice cracked, the sound layered with 1,000 other whispers. "I can't go back. It's already decided. The rhythm, it has to continue." The front door of the house flew open, not outward, but inward, with a force that felt like a localized vacuum, a tearing in the air itself. A sound poured out, the wet, rhythmic slapping of meat hitting wood and the high-pitched, harmonic ringing of 1,000 tuning forks. Something moved in the doorway. It was a mass of limbs and hair, a shifting, weeping collage of everyone who had ever been lost on Willow Street. It reached out, and its fingers were long, multi-jointed tendrils that smelled of ancient soil and stagnant water. They were not malicious, not in the way a predator is. They were simply needy. They were the hands of the forgotten, reaching out for purchase. Sarah didn't fight. She leaned into the touch, her eyes fixing on him with a final soul-shattering look of longing. "Don't mention us," she whispered, the sound vibrating directly inside his own skull, bypassing his ears entirely. "If you mention us, we become real. And if we become real, we can leave. We can finally feed." The house slammed shut. The sound was like a thunderclap that shattered every window on the block. The violet light extinguished, and the silence returned heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Julian sat in the middle of the intersection for hours, his body shaking with a violent, uncontrollable tremor. When the morning sun finally broke over the horizon, he was lying on the wet grass of his own front yard, his clothes torn, his skin covered in a thick, black slime that resisted scrubbing. He never found Sarah. The town, the people who had once been his friends and neighbors, behaved as if she had never existed. The police records showed no Sarah. The library had no record of an employee by that name. It was as if she had been erased from the fabric of existence, leaving behind nothing but the phantom ache in Julian's heart and the cold, wet residue on his clothes. Julian keeps his mouth shut. He doesn't tell the townspeople. He doesn't tell the authorities. He sits on his porch now, watching the intersection from afar, his hands trembling as he grips a mug of black coffee. He knows the truth now. The terror isn't just that something lives on Willow Street. It is a localized terror in reality that relies on the human mind to sustain its manifestation. He is a guardian of a grave that has no body. He doesn't look at the sign. He doesn't look at the void. And he prays that every other person in Oakhaven, those hollow-eyed, silent people, are keeping their secret as well. Because he knows that if just one person finally screams the name of that place, the thin, bruised violet veil will tear, and the hunger from Willow Street will finally be allowed to walk among them. Julian's silence is no longer an act of preservation. It is a slow-motion surrender. He is not a guardian standing at the gates. He is a prisoner who has started to fall in love with his chains. Every time he presses his lips into that bloodless line, he feels the familiar, static hum of the void vibrating against his teeth. It isn't just the wind anymore. It's a rhythmic, subterranean thrumming that matches the cadence of his own heart. He realizes, with a cold, detached terror, that the slime on his clothes didn't just stain his skin, it permeated his marrow. He is a vessel now, a tethered point of contact for the hunger that waits on Willow Street. The real horror isn't that he might be taken. It's that he is the one keeping the door ajar. Every night, as the violet haze bleeds into the sky, he finds himself standing at the edge of his property, staring toward that street he refuses to name. He isn't watching to see if the monster leaves. He is watching to make sure it remembers him. He hums the minor key melody under his breath, only a whisper, barely a vibration, just to feel the house on Willow pulse in response. He sees the neighbors watching him from behind their drawn curtains. They know what he is becoming. They see the way his eyes have begun to lose their color, bleaching into a pale, translucent shade of violet. They aren't avoiding him because they fear the secret. They are avoiding him because they can smell the rotting lilies radiating from his skin. They know the transition is nearly complete. He knows that one day soon, the hum will stop hiding. It won't stay buried beneath the power lines, the wind through empty streets, or the quiet moments between conversations. It will rise. Slowly at first, then all at once, until it becomes impossible to ignore. Julian feels it every morning when he wakes, and every night when the town grows still. He feels it in his bones, in the spaces between thoughts. He knows there will come a moment when he won't be able to keep pretending anymore. One day he'll walk into the center of Oakhaven and say the name of the street out loud. Not whisper it. Not think it. Scream it. He imagines people stopping mid-step, coffee cups freezing halfway to lips, conversations collapsing into silence. He imagines the sky hanging too low, as though something beneath the town finally hears itself being called. Sometimes he wonders if everyone already knows and simply chooses not to remember. Maybe forgetting is part of surviving here. But Julian understands something now that terrifies him more than the hunger. He isn't guarding the town. He isn't making some noble sacrifice. He's buying time. Every day he keeps the rhythm alive is another day he doesn't have to listen to Sarah's voice coming from places voices shouldn't exist. Another night before the thing under Oakhaven remembers he isn't special. And that thought rots inside him. Because he realizes he isn't waiting for someone to save. He's waiting for someone broken enough. Someone carrying enough grief. Someone who will follow the wrong sound, ask the wrong question, stare too long into the places that stare back. Someone he can give to it. Just once. Just long enough to breathe. He is the bait. The hook has been in so long he no longer remembers what freedom felt like. Sometimes he wonders if his voice is already in the whispers, if Sarah would recognize him anymore, or if she would only see another face dissolving into the rhythm. So he sits. He watches. He waits. Oakhaven breathes around him. And reaching into the empty air, feeling the familiar static against his skin. Julian begins to hum back,